Frictional Games has become known as a company which brought new life into the horror genre. It was one of their games which in fact introduced me to these exciting and immersive kinds of adventures in the first place, namely Amnesia: The Dark Descent, with an old and haunting castle to fuel my childhood fare of big, dark cellars, where the supernatural even might take hold. That is not the adventure I had in mind for today's episode, however, and instead, another deep fare from my childhood is about to resurface. Welcome to a series of short episodes where we recall how certain sights, sounds, and encounters were easily burned into our minds. In this episode, I will reach into my memory of going through Penumbra and share what made the most impact on me as I ventured through those chilly old tunnels beneath northern Greenland. I would love for you to share your own lasting impressions on any of the Penumbra chapters by commenting on this here video. Do not be shy in doing so. Here, allow me to break the ice by going first. Penumbra kicked off with Philip Buchanan, a man whose curiosity had overtaken him after his supposed dead father now had sent him a mysterious letter. Our protagonist took a big risk trying to find answers to this letter, having ended up at the end of the world, far away from civilization, but he needed answers. After following the rabbit hole all the way to Greenland and continuing on foot by himself, he almost faced a cold death in the rough Arctic storm. An entrance leading underground was miraculously located before it was too late, giving him some shelter from the fatal storm, although the rusty ladder collapses, and Philip has no choice but to venture through the underground tunnels which have housed both World War preparations, mining operations, and even archaeological excavation. It did not take long for me to realize that something was very off about these historic tunnels. The rocky environment was pulsating with a stone-cold ambience, warning against a haunting environment, reminding me that I likely would not make it out of here alive and that the world would forget about me while imposing a slow death. That's when I heard a loud, threatening call from deeper within, as startling as it was unexpected, and while my mind was not sure what exactly to make out of it, I was fairly certain it would not be humanoid in appearance, and nightmare fuel from my childhood was once again emerging. Following the howl, a soundtrack of dread filled the crude tunnels, fitting together like creeping thunder after a distant lightning strike. The ambient track harmonized well with my thoughts and mind, anxiously striving to draw a mental image of whatever might have been nearby, as I dared not to look. This memorable ambient track gave off a feeling of dread and panic. The mysterious and fast-paced thudding occurred in a series of 3, and it disharmonized with a distant boom occurring at fluctuating intervals, which gave the track a more unsettling feeling of unpredictability. Something similar can also be heard in the fast-paced track accompanying the servant grunt in Amnesia: The Dark Descent, with a disharmonized set of thuds and effects cleverly used to amplify the feeling of dread and unpredictability even further. So, what threat appeared to be lurking in these old tunnels, and why was Overture the most memorable chapter to me? The domesticated dog has been a human companion since ancient times, with some sources estimating domestication all the way back to more than 30,000 years ago. Having descended from wolves, dogs are highly sociable animals that have since comfortably lived side by side with humans. To this day, the four-legged man's best friend may stick around not only for company, but also for labor and safety, which could help explain their presence in these tunnels. It is hinted that they were once guard dogs. That is, before they changed for the worse. It seems like the Terngite infection has spread amongst the once loyal canines, having taken over and zombified them, as if they seemingly linger with little need for food or water, and they appear to slowly be rotting away, yet at the same time, they do act very much alive. So, when I think back to my journey through Penumbra, why do these four-legged creatures immediately come to mind? Why is it that these aggressive canines help create such a memorable, bone-chilling experience for me? I used to have a pet dog in my family during my early childhood. His name was Tommy, and he was a Cocker Spaniel. This breed of dog has been known to have anger issues, and while he was very protective of me, if I did try to pet him while he was feeling antisocial, I would be met with a threatening growl and perhaps even a bite to make sure that I would leave him alone. Probably not a good reason to fear dogs, but it could really scare me sometimes. I was quite young at the time, and still young when he had to be put down due to severe illness, a day most of which I still remember clear as day. It is not always easy to determine how fears come to be, and it does not always make sense, but my history with Tommy may have started it. Whatever the cause may be, he was family during my early stages of life, and I still think of him from time to time. May he rest in peace. For the remainder of my childhood, I was always terrified of dogs. Back in the day, in a super social childhood without internet nor mobile phones, imagine that, my friend group used to visit each other daily, and I was always scared of the residential dog of many families. These families would often leave their dogs either outside or right inside the front door. It was very difficult, if not impossible, for me to approach without one of my friends behind there with me. So, walking home from school, I would also always pick a much longer route, fearing that a dog may be in someone's garden again, next to a narrow path. As I dig a little deeper into my mind, I think one reasoning behind this all was that, in contrast to human beings, I could never tell the intentions of dogs. I could relate to a person. We are both human beings, and we would communicate our wishes and ideas using a common language, and although other people would usually ignore me, there were social laws. With dogs, there was no way for me to read them, yet they would always react to me. I always felt shaky and petrified near them, praying in advance not to be exposed to their often deafening barks and sudden poses or movement. I have also heard that dogs easily may sense your fear and then become even more noisy and intrigued as a result, which really would not make my day any better at all. There was simply no way for me to tell if a dog was happy to see me or if it wanted to brutally murder and tear me to pieces with its sharp teeth and strong jaw. I have had large dogs chase me, but dog size would not matter. In fact, one of my neighbors had a small dog the size of a chihuahua, and at one point it barked loudly and chased me down the street, ignoring the calls of its master. I lost a shoe while running, and I did not go back to retrieve it until much later. One of the following nights, I had a bone-chilling nightmare where I walked past this same neighbor and the same dog flew towards me and showed its abnormally large jaw and teeth, followed by me waking up in bed in a cold sweat. I also had a similar dream of the same neighbor and same dog multiple times. I could go on about my childhood's deep fear of dogs, but I think this will suffice to show why certain aspects of Penumbra affected me more than others. Over the years, I managed to numb my fear of dogs to the point that I was in control. I started telling myself that as long as I was careful, nothing bad could really happen, and that I should try to keep my cool. Encountering dogs in a creepy horror game makes that fear resurface a bit these days, but not in an unhealthy way or anything. Rather, in a way that greatly enhances the effect of the horror game for me. With that little backstory in mind, we may sink back into Penumbra's icy cold tunnels, where these altered canine creatures now continue to roam for decades, if not centuries. The humanoid threats yet to come, as terrifying as they appear, are still more similar and familiar to myself in both appearance and behavior, and they will even attempt to communicate with me in a common language. These dogs, however, are fundamentally very different from me, with their small and agile bodies, and they are known to be predatory in nature even before the infection. With the domesticated bond likely severed long ago, I simply would not know what to expect in the slightest, which causes me even more fear and uncertainty. Then there is the fact that these creatures, being so different from human beings, one could wonder whether or not they would detect my presence much quicker than had it been a humanoid, in which case hiding could become impossible. Does their degraded state of mind affect their senses? Does it make them even more aggressive than normal? Is there any way I can rationalize with them? No, not really. They're not human. I am doomed. Those are some of the thoughts I had while trying to sneak away from the first dog not long after entering these tunnels. If there was a feral fellow human being down here instead, then there would be some common ground. There could be a chance of negotiation, or at the very least, the knowing that we are both human could bring a tiny bit of comfort. Being trapped down here with dogs, ones that even sound rotten and angry, hungry for flesh, cause a special sense of isolation in these air tunnels. It is not just my childhood fears resurfacing. In fact, I feel completely alone and in instinct mode as I desperately and carefully search for signs of human life. But does this make any sense to anybody else? Or is this merely deeply rooted in my childhood's fear of dogs? Do let me know what you think. So, now you know an aspect, a hotspot of dread that stood in the way and lingered along my journey through the Penumbra series. Thank you very much for watching and listening to my first impression memories of this adventure, along with a peek into why I picked the dogs for this episode, and I wish you all a pleasant night to come. Or, as the haunting canines would put it, were they not, it is likely me thereafter. They can smell my fear, unless you are as wary of dogs as I am. Good night.